Hi, and welcome to Filmmaker's Compass, a show where we talk about movies and, well, more movies. I'm D-Man, joined by CP. CP, how are you doing today?
Great to be back, D-Man. Excited to talk about some movies here.
Well, we actually both made it to the theater, and we are going to be talking about a much more specific movie today, and one of our favorite genres, comic book movies. So,
Yay!
yay! Yeah, we're very excited for today's episode. Despite talking about comic book movies, I'm completely decked out and surrounded by Star Wars stuff. So if you're not watching, I literally have a Star Wars hoodie, I have Star Wars posters, and I literally have a couple of droids up there. So no Star Wars today, but we'll just make that our mention and move on. Uh,
Yeah, that's gonna be the only mention of Star Wars the whole episode. Yeah, right. I believe that, D-Man.
yeah, we'll see. Probably more to come. So anyway, as we do at the top of every show, CP, I want to go ahead and jump into some shout outs right off the top. So first up is Ivor, who actually just messaged us. He DM'd us and said, "Great to have you two back." So Ivor, it's great to be back, and I'm glad to hear that you're listening, and I can't wait to get your comments and feedback on today's episode. I'm really looking forward to it. So thank you for sending us a message. Next up is Courtney in reference to our post about the bear at Comic Con, the little bear shop that they had set up in the FX
Where they had
section.
the Italian beef. Yeah.
Jumped in and said, "You need to come to Chicago and get an actual one, though," which I'd be down to do a podcast from Chicago if we could get an Italian beef.
Dude, do you know how fat we would get if we did an episode in Chicago? Because probably all we would do is eat dogs, Italian beef, and pizza, and
And deep
just
dish pizza.
yeah. I'm like, it would be incredible though.
Can we just throw this out there? I know there's so many variations of hot dogs, like traditional LA, chili cheese, like all these different things. But is the Chicago dog just the ultimate best hot dog there is?
Well, I mean, obviously, as anyone knows on this show, I am an incredibly unbiased person. So when I say it is the best, that is like, it's just inherently the best. So I agree.
No, Italian beef from Chicago, uh, deep dish pizza, Lou Malnati's. I'm looking at you, and Portillo's Chicago dog. I mean, we're talking nines, tens out of 10 here. Like if we went to Chicago and recorded a podcast and
All
got
right.
all of that food, that would be like the ultimate weekend.
So, suggestion. I'm just throwing this out here, and audience, I'd love you to chime in. What if we just abandon the whole movie podcast thing and just start a Chicago eating tour podcast where we just go to all our favorite Chicago places and eat food and talk about it?
I would be down to do it and listen to it.
All right,
So
sounds good. Okay, well maybe that's where we're gonna be next week, everyone. Who knows? Stay tuned.
we would do photos, videos, the whole damn thing. I'd maybe make a vlog. I'd just start a new channel like Dustin Eats Chicago or something. That would be a lot of fun. Next up on our shoutouts list is to user WQ5W7C4D. So not 100% sure who we
Is
got
he a
here, but
droid? He sounds like a droid.
it might be. If we have robots or AI listening to the show, then we have made it. But if not, and you're out there just enjoying the podcast, thank you so much for commenting. They said, "I'm very impressed at how much you and CP really analyze everything. It always gets me so excited about watching the movies you talk about again or seeing a movie for the first time." So, what a great comment. I love it. That's amazing. That's kind of the whole point of this podcast. It's just to share our energy and passion for the movies. Because CP, here's the deal is, anytime we see a movie or something comes up, I pretty much just call you anyway. And so this podcast is just us just, formalizing and recording conversations we would otherwise have anyway.
Yeah, right.
So it's actually kind of amazing. And that's what we wanted to share with everybody is, we end up on these conversations where I want to be like, "Hey, CP, what time are you going to be here today?" And it devolves into like, "Dude, I just saw, Deadpool and Wolverine," and we talk about it for an hour. And I'm like, "Oh, that could have been a podcast," and now it is. So I love that energy. Drucker jumped in and said, "Yeah, man, I just went last week. Sploosh, it was freaking amazing. Everything that I wanted it to be, and then some." Referencing Deadpool and Wolverine.
Oh,
So
well, way to go, Drucker.
yes, Drucker, you are probably the perfect shout out to transition into our topic this week. But before we do that, want to give a couple of happy birthday shout outs to Tom Bryant, to Bob, and to my grandma Potter, who is up in heaven. So hope you're enjoying the pearly white gates and clouds and maybe dancing to the Backstreet Boys. I don't know.
That is what heaven is.
So, all right, CP. Well,
happy
that does it
birthday,
for our
everyone.
shout outs. Yeah, happy birthday. That does it for our shout outs. So I'm going to throw it over to you. Let's do a little box office breakdown.
All right, everyone, it is time for our box office breakdown. So we're going to start by looking at the domestic from this past week. A couple new movies in the top 5. Number 5 is the 15th anniversary release of the movie Coraline. It made just almost $15 million, so not
That
terrible.
shocks me.
I mean,
That's
considering
crazy.
that it was a Fathom special event, I'm actually blown away that it made that much, because I don't even remember it being like a huge cult movie the first time that it came around. So I was kind of shocked that they were going to do an anniversary release of it. But hey,
I'm not going to lie.
I'd be
That
wrong.
sounds like it made more money than some of the Spider-Man movies.
Right? Some of those Spider Mondays were literally like $800,000.
Yeah,
Like,
5 million maybe. I obviously like the best ones probably did over 15, but some of the other ones, I mean, I don't think they touch that. That's amazing.
I'm kind of shocked. I mean, again, just this was not a movie that I would have thought was even needed a special, anniversary release. So it's cool that apparently there's this huge community that loves it. I mean, obviously Tim Burton's always had a huge fan base, so I guess that's not completely surprising.
Definitely.
But number 4 spot, Twisters. It was in 3 before. Number 3.
Also, can I note on Twisters really quick? That's actually also pretty impressive because I saw a commercial on my TV and that is now available to rent or own. It's not streaming, but technically people could watch it at home. So I'm like, man, if people are still going to the theaters, then you might have a movie theater movie right there.
True. Number 3, a movie I know you were a big fan of, It Ends With Us, starring Blake Lively.
Ooh, did not see that.
Neither did I. Number 2, Deadpool and Wolverine. And number 1, premiering this past weekend at the box office, Alien Romulus, which made a little over $40 million.
Impressive. I mean, that's awesome to see the Alien franchise back on top. And obviously they dethroned Deadpool and Wolverine. And Alien, as long as it's been around, which is probably close to like 50 years now, to think that it's still chugging along at number 1, it's pretty impressive for that franchise.
Well, and the interesting thing too is, right, it was a Disney movie that dethroned a Disney movie. So far, Disney has had a killer summer between Inside Out 2, Deadpool and Wolverine, and then we'll see what happens with Alien Romulus, but not a bad opening weekend for sure.
No, that's awesome. I mean, usually it's week 2 where you sort of get a sense for how the movie's going to perform overall.
Mm-hmm.
What's that drop look like? And if it's within sort of an acceptable range, which ironically I think is like 50%, which is not insane. It's when it starts dropping like 60, 70%, where you're like, I don't know if it has enough gas to really, become a blockbuster. But if it stays under 50, then you're doing pretty freaking good.
Yeah. So again, talking about the worldwide box office, things haven't really changed for this year from what we talked about last weekend. The real numbers that we're interested in are Deadpool and Wolverine is number 2 in the international box office worldwide, and number 1 is still Inside Out 2. Now, the difference between those two movies is about $400 million. So it's going to be interesting to see if Deadpool and Wolverine has the ability to pass Inside Out 2, because as you made some great points last week, Inside Out 2 is an animated family movie. It's PG. Deadpool and Wolverine is not any of those things. So we'll see if it has the ability. The way things are shaping up at this point, it's kind of looking like Inside Out 2 is gonna be the
well, the other thing too,
high earner for the year.
I actually feel like box office reporting has benefited Inside Out 2 here as well. I think people are hearing about how successful it is, and then they're kind of like, oh, I kind of want to go see it then. Like, why is it so successful? Where I think earlier in the summer, we had a box office breakdown where we talked a little bit about how box office reporting might actually be hurting movies like Fall Guy, Furiosa, some of these movies where
these kind of doom forecasting where they're like, oh my gosh, it didn't make the $150 million they forecasted. It's a flop.
right, like you're seeing headlines calling it a flop. Well, in an ironic way, like I think that turns people away. They're like, oh, I kind of wanted to see it, but now I'll just wait. I'm not going to go. And you're like, man, the headlines, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy here.
Yep.
Like And with Inside Out 2, I think we're seeing the inverse of that, where you're seeing it is performing way better than was expected. And I think a lot of family people were like, well, if it's that good, like maybe I should take my kids. That
Yeah.
sounds awesome.
Yeah. No, I
So
agree.
interesting. And congratulations, Pixar. I mean, to see them back on top is pretty impressive. It's actually crazy when you look at those two movies, CP. If I'm not mistaken, Inside Out 2 is now officially the highest grossing animated film. And we sort of made that distinction between like live action, animation, Lion King and stuff. But like the highest grossing animated film, and Deadpool and Wolverine is now the highest grossing R-rated comedy. So
Mhm.
they're busting through box office glass ceilings here and making a little bit of history. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty crazy. So Disney back on tap.
And there they are. They did it again. They stole Comic-Con. They're dominating the box office. They're back, baby. All right. Well, CP, as Drucker mentioned, and you have now mentioned in both the domestic and international box office, Deadpool and Wolverine. That is the movie that we both actually got to go see in the movie theater. And it's time for us to talk about it. So I'm very excited.
Yay!
So, first up, Deadpool and Wolverine. What are your thoughts on the movie overall?
Is that a loaded question?
No, I mean, let's just get your hot
Look,
take. I mean, I know
I
you could have followed along on social, but let's just hear it.
I really liked Deadpool and Wolverine, and obviously we were in many ways getting exactly what I think we were hoping for as Deadpool fans. More of kind of the same character and situations that we got in the previous two movies, but I think the pairing Wolverine was really smart. It was great to see Hugh Jackman suiting up again as the Wolverine that we've come to know over the last 25 years. And I thought the movie was a fantastic tribute to the Fox Marvel universe. I really
Yeah, I
enjoyed
mean,
it.
I also really enjoyed the chemistry between Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman. Obviously, they've had chemistry outside of the movie.
Mhm.
For years, they've been sort of doing this back and forth on social media where they're constantly poking fun at each other and their characters and having a good time with that. Obviously, the Deadpool and Wolverine popcorn bucket is a
Yep.
nod to that back and forth.
Mhm.
And I thought they really did sort of have good chemistry, especially just for, a comic book movie. We're not talking about romance here, maybe a bromance,
Yep.
but they do pretty well. I thought the comedy actually hit pretty well for the most part. It's very on par for Deadpool. I was a little worried, given that this is the first Deadpool produced by Disney, that they might sort of nerf it. And I didn't get the vibe that they really withheld anything that might have otherwise been in it if it was produced by 20th Century Fox or 21st Century Fox. So, and I thought most of the jokes landed. They seem to have a pulse on what the audience is expecting and who Deadpool is. Hugh Jackman, maybe the butt of a couple of the jokes, and all of that doesn't really get a ton of comedy, but Deadpool just steals the show, which he should. It's a Deadpool movie at the end of the day. So I thought that worked really well. Um, any weaknesses though? Was there anything in the movie that you thought maybe what the hell?
Hmm. Um, I thought that how do I want to say this? The villains were the weak point I saw
Okay. Yeah, I have to
from
agree.
it. It just there wasn't a lot of substance to them. They felt very stock in a lot of ways. I know the attempt to really link Cassandra Nova back to the whole thing with Charles Xavier and the X-Men, it was there. The whole idea of just sort of deleting timelines kind of feels with it's sort of the issue I've had with all the Marvel stuff with with the multiverse. There's
Yeah, I
these
would agree.
grandiose stakes that are so grand they're almost insignificant.
Yeah, it's almost like it has to get bigger and bigger and bigger to eventually the point where you're like, I mean, it's completely unrealistic. But more than that, I do agree with you about Cassandra Nova, where I felt like at first there's this cool sort of introduction where I'm like, okay, this is awesome. And it just sort of devolves into her wanting to like destroy the multiverse. And I don't
Yeah.
know. I didn't find it to be very compelling. They sort of made that connection between Charles Xavier and to me, without him being in it and sort of having the weight of that relationship, it's
And
more just like trivia than it
yeah,
actually
no, I
means
agree.
anything.
I agree. If Charles was there and he was trying to redeem her, right? And we kind of were seeing the juxtaposition of who Charles Xavier is as we know him versus kind of the bastardization he could have become if he became her. I
Yeah.
think that would have been a real interesting dichotomy to explore.
And they don't, because they don't bring him back in either form. I mean, you could have gone with young Charles or old Charles. I don't know, however you want to do it. It's multiverse. It really just weakens her character arc overall. In fact, I don't even know if she has a character arc except like I just want to destroy the multiverse. And you're kind of
Yeah.
like, it's all right. I mean, and then the other villain I would say is the TVA. Obviously, they're trying to prune people and timelines, and it's kind of weird because I don't really understand it. I was going to ask you, CP, like, can you actually sort of like, I don't know, explain this story a little bit? Like, okay, so I do have a note here. I
Okay.
looked up some stuff from people online and my own questions. Like the concept of an anchor being in the MCU multiverse, it just the idea of an anchor being doesn't make much sense to me. Can you like even break that down? I don't even get it. Like, for instance, like if the death of an anchor being causes a universe to collapse, wouldn't that eventually happen to every universe since they're not immortal? Is this like Avatar where like it just gets passed on to like the next anchor being? Like I don't even know if they bothered to even try to explain it.
I don't think they even tried to explain it. And I think the the throwaway line of dialogue that they used to justify the anchor beams was right that it would take thousands of years or millions of years for the universe to decay after the death of an anchor beam. But what about before an anchor beam is born? Right?
Yeah, right.
How long does the universe exist before the right anchor being appears? So I thought that that was, again, there's so many problems that we've seen with this with the multiverse storyline, and part of it is they as they keep trying to create rules to add stakes to the
Yeah.
multiverse. I think that all they do is just make it more convoluted and more meaningless to
I
audiences.
I think it just, it's like when we talk about like time or yeah, like time travel in movies. Like eventually if you just ask too many questions, you're like it won't add up to much because it doesn't make any sense. Like for instance, if Deadpool had a tempad, why didn't he just use it to go back in time and prevent Wolverine dying, in whatever Earth he was in or whatever timeline he was in? Or like cuz I think you rewatched Deadpool too, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
doesn't he do that to save Vanessa?
Yeah,
He just takes
exactly. He
Cable's
just
time
takes
traveling
Cable's
device.
time traveler and just goes back in time.
Yeah, so like it opens
Also
all these
saves Peter.
doors. Right, it like opens all these doors of like I mean, couldn't you just go back and like prevent that rather than go through, I don't know, some of the stuff they're doing? And then I don't know. Like I'm also wondering, okay, so the TVA is saying that they pruned all of these other Deadpools, right? That
Mhm.
show up in the void and then obviously so spoiler alert cameos, right? Elektra, Blade, they basically have a throwaway line in the movie where they say like we just prune anyone that's messing around with the multiverse, but I'm like how the hell are those guys messing around with the multiverse?
Yeah, Doctor Strange and Tony Stark and people aren't messing around multiverse.
Yeah, like they're
Or
like, oh, we pruned
Thanos
these guys.
himself.
It
Yeah.
felt like more of just like, hey, multiverse fun, like let's just get a bunch of old, like you said, it's sort of an homage to the old 20th century Fox Marvel,
Yeah.
and they just do it like that. But like, I don't know, it's just weird because it's like, Johnny Storm, how's he messing around in the multiverse? Why is he in the void? Why is he pruned?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so some of that stuff to me just never added up. Um, and then I also wondered watching the movie, like, why are all of the other Deadpools like against him bad?
That's a great point that's never explained except for Nice Pool. Nice Pool, right?
Yeah.
Nice Pool goes on to say that all the, Deadpools are a dime a dozen, but that they're all really mean, which again just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it was weird. They're just like against them. And you're like, I mean, maybe. I mean, did they pledge allegiance to Cassandra Nova or something that we don't know about? Because the movie
Mhm.
doesn't really explain it. They just show up and it's like epic battle time. And I mean, it is a pretty cool intro with the Madonna song,
Mhm.
uh, and like, them sort of suiting up. But I was like, I don't understand why they're fighting them. Like,
Yeah.
or why
Yeah.
they wouldn't be on their side. Like, why wouldn't they be on the side of Deadpool?
Yeah. Right.
So, and then something else that again just didn't have any explanation. It felt like it was more so just plot driven in a sense to get Deadpool to the MCU timeline. But I didn't understand why like Vanessa and Wade broke up. Um, it
Yeah,
was
especially since the other two movies are all about his relationship with Vanessa, right?
well, and he clearly still loves her throughout this
Hmm.
movie. So, and they
Yeah.
never explain why they broke up because all indications point to in the past two movies that they were 100% like together, engaged, wanted to start a family, all this different stuff. And then in this movie, they're just like friends. And they never say why. But in my opinion, it came across more like they're going to end this side of the Deadpool story and
Hmm.
he's going to move on into the MCU and they're just not taking any of these characters with them. This was our goodbye.
That was kind of the vibe I got.
And basically they were like if they're still together and she's not here, well then that's weird. So instead, let's just have like sort of a proper farewell. They're on good terms, but they won't be together while Deadpool's in the MCU.
Yeah, I don't know in any way. It was really weird. I also don't know why he was a salesman for Honda, you know. I know how helpful those, helpful
I
Honda
mean,
people are, but why was Deadpool selling
great
used
product
cars?
placement. CP, this is the one I need your help with though. And I do need your help. So this movie was set in 2024, which means that on the main timeline, Wolverine and Laura should still be alive, correct? Or on not the main timeline, in the Fox timeline,
Yes, it should be.
because that
Because that was like
those events take
2028 or something
2029.
is when Logan is. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. Would that mean that there are two Wolverines and two Lauras, or I don't know. I don't know that they actually thought all that much about it. They're like, hey,
No.
just where we end up is where we end up. This is our farewell, our salute to 21st
Well,
Century
and
Fox.
and technically, right? Isn't X-23 still alive as well from the
Yeah, I think
Logan
so.
movie?
Yeah. So, like, there was definitely some continuity errors here. Some things where I was kind of like, what is happening? But on that note, we did mention some of the
Be,
cameos. How did you
be,
feel about the. Oh, go ahead.
no, no, because from a story perspective, right? Deadpool's universe and the universe with 2029 Hugh Jackman Logan who dies for the young mutants from Mexico, right? Like in the
Yeah.
movie is one.
Right.
So technically Logan dies 5 years after the movie. That's the point you're making.
Kind of. Yeah. It's like, if you're just being accurate about it, I don't know how time passes in the void, or, maybe they're just going to explain it away with like, oh, X amount of time passed while he was looking for Wolverines or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was just one of those things where it was like, if you just do some simple
Mathematics.
logic in your head, you're like, I don't know, this doesn't all add up. And then somewhere in there, I don't know if it's before or after this movie, but Days of Future Past happens,
True.
right? I
Hmm.
think they said, there's in the Fox Marvel timeline that in Logan they mentioned, and again, this you sort of see this play out in Days of Future Past, that there was this sort of referendum on mutants that did play out. A lot of them disappeared. There were not many left by 2029. Obviously, Charles Xavier destroys the X-Men in like 2028. So yeah, I don't know. It was just weird.
Yeah, that's a good question.
So I don't know. I was kind of interested in it, but whatever. I guess that's how it's going to be. But on that note, CP, the cameos in this movie, there are plenty,
One
and
of the
there's a lot of nostalgia
best
and nods
parts. Yeah.
to 21st Century Fox. Do you want to sort of lay out some of your favorite ones?
Well, I mean, let's start with probably what I would consider the biggest, getting to see the Gambit that was never actually realized in cinema was a very clever nod.
Yeah, Channing Tatum seemed like he was having a lot of fun. He was happy to be there and
Hmm.
finally get to portray, Gambit, I think, the way that he was always pushing for that project. So, and that was pretty cool because, I don't know if going forward, right, kind of the same way John Krasinski played what's his name?
Mr.
Reed
Fantastic.
Richards. Yeah, Mr. Fantastic in uh Doctor
The Mar
Strange Multiverse of
Yeah.
Madness.
Yeah.
Like we may never see him as that character again. We might have Gambit, but he might be recast at that
Yeah.
point. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So that was pretty cool. Obviously, we mentioned earlier Elektra and Blade made
Yep.
appearances, which was pretty neat. It was pretty surprising. I think most people in the audience were like, "Oh, no way." Nobody thought those two characters were coming back, especially right Wesley Snipes as Blade. I mean, he basically came in and he's like, "There's no other Blades." Like,
Well, and that's really cool given the fact that apparently filming Blade Trinity, right? Ryan Reynolds and Wesley Snipes did not get along in any way. So it's cool that they were able to reconcile enough to bring that character officially into canon.
it was interesting they had Elektra and not Daredevil. I mean, as actors, Jennifer Garner and Ben Affleck,
Don't.
share kids together. They're
Mhm.
divorced, but at the same time, I believe they're on good terms. So I was a little shocked that they didn't maybe try to do something fun. They did poke fun at it,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
Daredevil wasn't there. So that was interesting. Another big cameo was Chris Evans as Johnny Storm,
Yep.
uh, which the Human Torch. It was
thought
amazing.
thought that was great getting to see him. They obviously played off it really well, making us think he was a variant of Captain America to start the movie. So they had fun. They used it exactly as they should when they dropped the bomb that he's a Human Torch. Like, it's a big surprise for us, the audience, and it's a big surprise for the characters in the movie. So that was awesome.
Yeah, I
There's
thought they
also
nailed that cameo. That was
oh,
probably my favorite one.
totally,
Just because
totally,
they actually did have me. Like Deadpool's over there. He's like, oh, he's gonna do it. He's gonna do it, right? Avengers assemble.
yeah,
And nope. Flame on.
yeah, right.
It was awesome.
Um, What else? We got to see plenty of great X-Men reprise their roles and cameos. There was Pyro, there was Azazel, there was original Sabretooth and Toad, which, the Juggernaut. Fantastic getting to see all these characters that we've seen throughout the Fox X-Men universe. My only real disappointment was I wish that the Sabretooth and Wolverine fight was a little bit longer than it was.
Yeah, I
Felt
was
like
totally gonna say that. I
got
was
a
like, I
little cut
wish
short.
we got a little bit more of like a banger of a battle right there. I mean, technically you do if you go watch X-Men Origins Wolverine,
Yeah.
but just those two characters because it's so short-lived on the Statue of Liberty in X-Men. But
Mhm.
yeah, it was pretty neat. There was just cameos all over the place. There's, obviously they're in the void, but you sort of see the ruins of the 20th century Fox logo. And,
Yep.
they keep doing all these sort of nods to, all the different moments from the Fox Marvel timeline. So that was pretty cool. I wanted to ask you, how was your audience while you watched this movie? Do you think this is a movie that's definitely better with an audience on the big screen?
I think it's definitely better with an audience. Unfortunately, the first time I watched it, I could tell it was an audience that didn't know their Marvel history
Okay.
because a lot
So
of those early cameos they weren't really receptive of, even to the point that there's a lot of separate Wolverine cameos that we get in the movie, different variants of
there's a
Wolverine.
montage where he's trying to find the
Yeah. Yeah.
anchor being Wolverine, and he travels across the multiverse to try to find these Wolverines. They have the little short Wolverine. They actually
Comic book
have the
accurate.
brown and yellow suit Wolverine, which can we just nod to that looking incredible? I mean, it
Yeah.
was a 5-second shot, but
Yeah.
you're like, it's there. They
We
did
get
it.
right. We get Old Man Logan. We get Henry Cavill Wolverine, which was my personal favorite.
Of course it was.
We get the Wolverine on the X from the Fever Dream storyline. Like all really cool. But I could tell watching it that I had an audience that was not in any way like picking up all this stuff.
Well, that's kind of interesting. That's an interesting point to the overall sort of concept of the multiverse and where Marvel's at now, like, 15 years into the MCU, which is, you think of the movie Avengers Endgame, right? For those moments in Avengers Endgame to really hit, you sort of have to have been following the MCU, right? I could totally imagine if you took somebody who's never seen a Marvel movie and then Captain America picks up Thor's hammer, they're going to be like, I don't get it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like, I don't even know what that's referencing, and I don't even think Endgame even at any point plots that in there so that, like, if you were watching this as a standalone film, it would hit because
Yeah.
he doesn't get Mjolnir till he goes and travels back in time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's not even enough time to even explain that.
Yeah.
You'd have to have watched Thor and Avengers and Age of Ultron in particular. for that, I knew it reference. But in general, it's interesting because, right, I feel like in order to truly appreciate and understand all of the references and things that are happening in Deadpool and Wolverine, and that extends to the plot. So we're talking about the Void and Goliath and literally the TVA. Like, they don't even explain what the TVA is. It's just like, you better have watched Loki.
Yeah, right. That's more than just the cinematic MCU. You have to go into the shows.
Yeah, time variance authority. But it's one of those things where it's like, you have to do your homework to truly enjoy this movie. Like, can it be fun on its own? Sure. But I really don't think, if you're not into Marvel, you didn't appreciate the Fox Marvel, I don't think this movie's for you.
Well, and I think that that's the tough thing. I mean, 1999 was when X-Men kicked it all off, the Fox, Marvel Cinematic Universe. And
I'm gonna date us here, but we're that sounds weird. But were we in middle school?
I mean, I wasn't even born then, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, right.
And then the last time we saw Chris Evans as the Human Torch was 2006. So this is before a substantial portion of the audience was really engaged with comic book movies.
Yeah. And I think it's to the detriment of the movie. Now, not to its box office receipts. It's done really well. But in my opinion, the convoluted plot, sort of the things that we were mentioning earlier that maybe don't make sense if you just, think about things for a second. And then all of the self-referential elements to the film. If you're not a fan, I think it definitely lessens the experience of this movie.
Yeah.
I don't think you'll appreciate it as much. It's just,
I agree.
But then again, it's a movie made for Marvel fans. It's made for fans of the Fox Marvel timeline specifically, and it is sort of their farewell to that whole era. And you could clearly tell they're transitioning everything over to the MCU.
Yeah,
it's over.
Yeah.
So, do you think this ends the multiverse storyline?
I mean, Deadpool himself was highly critical of the MCU and the multiverse storyline. And if nothing else, the film was kind of Disney's apologies to the fans for really kind of messing stuff up. So it may be there as an element on the periphery, but I think the whole concept of we're universe hopping, we're encountering variants, I think that for the most part, that's done.
It would be nice if it is. I mean, it felt like at the Comic-Con panel where they revealed Doctor Doom and sort of did the pivot to the Rousseau brothers and they're abandoning the Kang storyline. It felt a little bit like when we were there that was sort of the official, right? And Deadpool and Wolverine released that weekend. We just didn't have a chance to see it because we were so busy. But that did feel like the pivot away, to the degree that they're like, listen, we're just not really doing this multiverse stuff. And Deadpool and Wolverine is the movie that is probably the farewell to a lot of that story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I kind of hope it is. I'd like to see, I mean, we mentioned the new Captain America movie coming out, and just seeing sort of stakes restored to a proper level of storytelling, where it's like, with all the multiverse stuff, eventually, like, when anybody can come back, everybody can, and therefore your stakes and the consequences for the story existing just sort of fade away.
Yeah. And absolutely.
I think overall it lessens the product a little bit. Is it fun to get all these crossovers and cameos? It's like, yeah, it's fun. But now we've done it, right? We got Spider-Man No Way Home. We got Deadpool and Wolverine for the 20th Century Fox version. That was Sony. This is Fox.
Mm-hmm.
We have the MCU in general, which is a cross-pollination of all the franchises they have in the MCU. So, like, I feel like we've done it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a little over it. Unless, I like I said, I would have loved to have seen a version of Kang that, if they really knew how to sort of tell a cinematic story with his ability to control the multiverse in a really, really unique way, I would be down for it. But if all they're going to have him do is just fight people, like fist fights like he fought Ant-Man, I don't know. I'm over it.
No.
Yeah, I'm over it. Like, I mean, I feel like you look at Kang, if he has access to all these different timelines, then he wouldn't even need to punch Ant-Man, because he would know where to move, or like, he can go through time.
Yeah.
Like, he should be way ahead of the Avengers. They should have no clue how to beat him. And I don't either, right? I don't freaking know.
Mm-hmm.
But hopefully Marvel would. But I'd be here for something like that. Maybe if they want to retry this story at a later date, sort of bring Kang back, maybe recast him or something and actually go for it, I'd be here for it. But
Yeah.
I want to see like some crazy mind trippy way to fight Kang, not just a fist fight.
Yeah. It just seemed kind of failed from the start because they never presented a villain worthy of assembling the entire Avengers to defeat him.
Yeah. Agreed. Well, okay, CP, I got to throw it over to you. I'm sure this is probably your favorite question we're going to talk about this entire
Ooh,
time.
okay.
Is the Deadpool and Wolverine version of Wolverine the best we've ever gotten in live action?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely.
Really?
I think look, we saw a Logan who actually had some vulnerability, right?
Yeah.
As a character with this insane healing factor and this prolonged lifespan, like the weakness to Logan is his relationship to the people around him, right? And we found a
Interesting.
broken guy who'd lost everything, who had something to prove, and it was his arc for redemption. I also feel that in the situation by partnering him with Deadpool, we got to see Wolverine's personality magnified in the way that as fans we love.
Yeah.
So
He also
I think it was really good.
he also came across as prime Wolverine,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's not the version, from the main Fox timeline. He did come across as like, hey, this is like the most comic accurate. And to that end, what are your thoughts on the suit?
Incredible. Incredible. Right? Since since the beginning of time. In fact, I think when the 1999 X-Men came out, one of the big complaints that a lot of comic book fans is they're like, why are these X-Men just wearing, leather clad jackets and jeans? Like these aren't the X-Men.
Yeah.
And we finally got the yellow. We got the mask. We got the Wolverine that we've always wanted as X-Men fans. I mean, you know, it took us 25 years, but we got it. Also, I mean, the real shame out of it, I think, is seeing how difficult it's truly going to be to replace Hugh Jackman as Wolverine.
Yeah, and they don't explicitly say in definitive terms that he will be returning.
Well, according to Deadpool, Disney is going to make him do it till he's 90. So,
Yeah, I don't know. And can we just acknowledge like Hugh Jackman is literally jacked. Now, I don't know if they're doing any CGI overlay or if that is 100% all him, but I mean, for however old he is, 50s probably. I mean,
I think he's like
he
58.
looks stunning. That is a beautiful man. Uh yeah, he looked amazing. There's a scene where he actually is like flexing as his costume sort of
Yep.
disintegrates around him. And I mean, he is like jacked. He's Hugh
Yep.
Jackman for sure. And yeah, Wolverine, I don't know how long he can keep doing that. I mean, most of us can't even do it anyway. Like, I wish I could.
No, I mean,
Look like
considering
that
that
once in
he's
my life.
again, considering that he has been doing that for 25 years, abs and everything, I'm like, man, good for you, Hugh Jackman.
I mean, is that just the perfect casting though? Like, he's been such an incredible Wolverine through the years. Even his performance in Logan is lights out.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, he was the breakout star of the original X-Men,
Yep.
just incredible. I mean, Wolverine is usually considered maybe the most popular X-Men anyway, but yeah, they cast him perfectly and he has nailed the role throughout the years. So it was incredible to see. I mean, obviously, Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool is also perfectly cast. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I know you didn't even know who Deadpool was before Ryan Reynolds was cast, right?
Like as like a everyone, like what do you mean?
Like a comic book character, because you're not big into comics.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know anything about him. I've never heard of Deadpool. I
Oh
thought
no,
it was, I thought it was a
I
movie
thought
of
you were
like a
just a Ryan
horror
Reynolds
movie.
fan. Yeah, I mean, I thought you didn't even know it was a comic book movie. You just went because of Ryan Reynolds.
I mean, come on, aren't we all Ryan Reynolds fans? Man
Yeah, I
owns
mean,
Wrexham.
can we acknowledge that guy too? It's absolutely insane, his business acumen. I mean, I know we're not talking about Deadpool and Wolverine here, but like if you tie it all together, like you said, he's part owner of Wrexham, Mint Mobile, some gin or vodka, what tequila, I don't know, whatever.
Aviation Gin. You should
Jin, yeah.
watch Welcome to Wrexham.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, this guy's all over the place, but if you actually tie it all together and you think about his movie star status and what that allows him to bring to these businesses, it's PR, it's exposure. And by, continuing to play Deadpool and have the successes that he has as an actor, it allows him to bring so much value to these companies, both as an owner and as
Yeah.
like a sponsor.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's incredible. I mean, this guy has just completely dominated business.
I agree.
All through the fact that he gets attention.
Yep.
He nailed it.
Yep.
So,
and again, much like Hugh Jackman with his support for the character of Wolverine, Ryan Reynolds genuinely seems to love playing Deadpool. He was obviously the driving force between getting the Deadpool movies made before. And it's just great having actors who really love and embrace and celebrate those characters that they're known for.
yeah, it's quite fun. Now, in this movie, I wanted to ask you, going a little bit of a separate direction here now, do you think there's ever such a thing as too much fan service? Because, I mean, this is a movie really catering to fans.
Yes. I think there was too much. And one of the reasons why is there are X-Men making cameo appearances in this movie that I don't even know if people realize. For example, the character of Psylocke makes an appearance
from Days of Future Past.
And she is in it for literally 30 seconds of screen time total.
I don't even think I caught it.
And you're like, what's the purpose of bringing these characters in if we're not actually going to get time with them?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, and that's the sort of level of fan service. I think people, when we say fan service, I'm not talking about attention to detail. That is impressive, right? When there's elements that you're like, oh, cool, like that's cool that that's there. And if you notice it, you appreciate it, right? That's to me fan service. But like you said, there's certain elements I think where you start going overboard is where it's like you're literally doing things that don't contribute really to anything character or story related.
Well, like for example, the villain from the second Punisher movie, the Russian, is also one of Cassandra Nova's goons. If you didn't recognize him, you didn't know he was in the movie. And I'm almost like, we've reached a point where like this is beyond what we need. If we're not going to give these characters the screen time to actually interact and be meaningful to the story, it's almost like, why put them in there, you know?
Yeah, like a perfect example of what we're talking about here is like in Avengers Endgame, when Ant-Man says that's not our only time machine, and then he hits the keys and you hear like da-na-na-na-na, da-na-na-na-na. That's not in there as a joke solely. It is a cue to where their time machine actually is, and it's a cue to the audience that we should know what that time machine is.
Yes.
It was in the back of that van. It also makes that running gag incredibly important.
Yep.
Where at first it probably felt like just like some guy's funny van, like that's his horn. But in the end, it ended up mattering a great deal. Yep. And I think when you do fan service that way, when you pay it out and it actually does affect the story and, the audience's knowledge of what's come before, then you're using it properly. But when you just start stuffing things in just to try to get, and I understand this is a farewell movie to the Fox Marvel timeline. So they're like, hey, let's just get as much as we can in because this is the last time we're really going to be able to do it. So I do understand here, but yeah, in general, like if you just start doing that, I think it's to the detriment of the fan service and the characters because like you said, you just don't get enough time or enough appreciation for why they were ever there in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah.
So on that note, though, CP, was there anyone you wanted to see in the movie who wasn't in it?
Oh, there were a few. A few. The biggest for me was Tom Jane's Punisher. I actually think the original Punisher movie is an incredible entry into the comic book film universe that I think we've kind of overlooked as time's gone on. I think that was from 2003. So it was way back there.
Sean and I saw it in theaters.
Yeah, people loved Tom Jane Punisher, and he, I mean, so much so that he came back a couple years later and reprised the role in the Adi Shankar short film Punisher Laundry Service, just because people wanted to see him as the Punisher. And again, as an actor, he was an actor who supposedly really enjoyed the character. In fact, he refused to come back for the Punisher 2 because he said he didn't think that the story gave the character the justice that it deserved. So I think it would have been really cool if the Punisher was part of that, the heroes in the variant. I mean, obviously he is referenced, right? His rocket
Yeah.
launcher is used. So it would have been cool if he had made an appearance as part of it, if they could have made it work out.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, I think it would have been neat if Daredevil had been there.
Yeah, I would agree.
I
Right?
would have been here for it. If they're bringing Elektra in anyway, I think if you had Daredevil and they actually did have some back and forth banter, because obviously he would probably be a part of that team that's
Mm-hmm.
taking on Cassandra Nova and her squad. So I doubt he would just be like a quick one shot and then he's gone.
Yeah. No, I
I
agree.
think that could have worked. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, like I said, the number one person that I thought was missing that would have really enhanced the story was Charles Xavier. That
Yeah.
was it.
I mean, why have a Cassandra Nova story if you're not going to introduce Charles? It
I
just doesn't
think
make
that would
sense to
have
me.
enhanced her character arc, would have added a new element to Charles Xavier that we haven't seen before, and overall probably would have improved the dramatic stakes of the story. Um,
I also think it would have been valuable for the Wolverine storyline in the film, right?
yes, exactly.
Obviously, his last interaction with Charles Xavier was Logan, where he watches Charles Xavier die. He is dealing with the fact that he was the Wolverine who stood by and watched the rest of the X-Men in his timeline be destroyed. I think it would have been, knowing the history of cinematic Logan and his relationship with Charles Xavier, I think it would have brought the right closure to the character, to really be a fitting send off in this movie.
I agree. I think that's probably all you would really need. If any of our listeners, if there's somebody from like the Fox universe or even a crossover from the MCU that you think should have been here, because we are looking at, right, a crossover with things like the TVA, Time Variance Authority, Goliath. There are things from the MCU coming in as well. I'd be interested to hear what your guys' thoughts are. Obviously, we got one of the Fantastic Four, not all of them.
Mm-hmm.
There could have been a chance for maybe some more X-Men characters to actually pop up or appear, but I don't know if any of that would actually make any sense. And to this degree that we sort of debated earlier, I don't know if it makes all that much sense now.
Mm-hmm.
You're with Deadpool and Wolverine, I feel like they're like, listen, turn off your logic, enjoy the ride. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be funny. There's going to be some incredible action. And on that note, CP, when it comes to the action or even just a scene, what was your favorite?
Ooh.
Because I can tell
Um,
you mine. I actually loved the opening credits scene where he digs up Old Man Logan and then does
to
the
to
battle to In Sync, Bye
to
Bye
instinct,
Bye.
bye bye bye. Yeah.
It was a great way to just kick off the movie and just make it incredibly awesome.
I like that. I also loved the battle against the 100 Deadpools at the
That was
towards
pretty
the
dope.
conclusion of the movie. I mean, again, if we're gonna add in all these different Deadpool characters, let's make them fight and see what happens.
Yeah, right. And it was cool. I mean, and there's even some additional actor cameos. They're under masks here, but I believe Blake Lively was one of them.
Yep.
Uh, there were
Nathan
different people that
Fillion was
were.
one of them. Yeah, there were a lot. Actually, I want to change my answer. I think my very favorite one is actually the part where they find themselves in the bunker, where they wake
Oh,
up,
okay.
Wolverine's drinking the booze, and all of a sudden the cameos start happening. And everyone, you're like, oh my gosh. And then they bring in someone else, and you're like, oh my gosh. I thought that was a lot of fun. That's exactly what I want in cameo appearances. Each character had their 30 seconds of screen time where it was all about them. And then we went on to the next one, and that was a lot of fun. So changing
Yeah,
my
I thought
answer.
thought that was great. And then let me see here really quick. Finally,
Finally.
where do you see Deadpool and Wolverine fitting into the MCU?
I don't actually see them fitting into the MCU.
Interesting. So you don't think they'll pop up in Avengers Doomsday or the following Avengers
I
film?
don't think they will, and I don't think they should.
Okay.
And the only
Interesting
reason
take.
why is, like, from a storytelling perspective, I think it's essential that Marvel start finding ways to kind of reduce the scale, not just the scope of the story, but the characters involved.
Okay.
And bringing in Deadpool, bringing in Wolverine kind of keeps the door open to all these other things that as an audience we're saying, well, why aren't you bringing in Colossus, right? Why aren't you bringing in the rest of the X-Men? You know, why aren't you bringing in all these other things? And I think that in order to make the MCU work for fans, Disney needs to keep it smaller, keep it focused. We need to know who's on the team and what are the pieces that are in play. And Deadpool and Wolverine, not only are their powers kind of trumped up and above and beyond most of the other ones, but it opens the door to too many other possibilities that I think Disney needs to stay away from.
I mean, when you think about Deadpool and Wolverine and how both of them have literally been attacked throughout all of their movies, I mean, these guys should be dead like 30 times over each.
Yeah, right.
You know, they are sort of invincible in that way, where I think this movie works so well because we're able to hang out with them and have fun with it. You know, breaking the fourth wall and sort of acknowledging all this multiverse nonsense and just sort of the idea that these guys are indestructible. It does sort of lower, or it makes the stakes less than, you know, because we always know they won't die.
Well, and doesn't that also reduce, I mean, I guess this is what you're saying, right? This is going to reduce the drama of future Avengers movies. When all of a sudden we're dealing with a serious situation and Deadpool turns to the audience and breaks the fourth wall. I just don't see it working.
Right? Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, I could see it like if he did it like once or twice as like just a tip of the cap to Deadpool. But yeah, I kind of agree. There's a silliness to these movies. There's a suspension of disbelief that it's like, you know, it's more fun than it is a serious toned story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, prove me wrong, Marvel, if, you know, I'm here for it. So I'm not arguing against it. I'm just saying I don't see it. So obviously Wolverine, Hugh Jackman Wolverine specifically, it just, to me, it's an actor thing. How long? He's already retired from the role once. He brought it back. But I mean, how long is he really going to keep doing this? And do you really want to bring him into the MCU just to have him gone? I mean, maybe if he made some sort of sacrifice or did something, but honestly, like he already did in Logan, and it was very poignant and well done. So, I mean, I'd be shocked if there was a way that would top that. And I don't know. And like I said, I think it's more of an actor thing. Like if you're going to introduce Wolverine into the MCU, I think you want to cast the guy that's going to play Wolverine for the next 10 years, next 15 years or whatever.
No, I agree.
So I don't know who that would be. And I don't know that there is actually anyone better than Hugh Jackman. It would have been awesome if he was, his 1999 age now, and we could bring him in. That'd be amazing. But,
I mean, but even again, right? When we look at the decision to when they recast Charles Xavier and Magneto with Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy, like, I don't think anyone thought that they were going to be as incredible as they were. And they were actually really good replacements for two incredible actors who totally embodied those characters in ways that I think up until that point, no one would have ever thought you could have topped them.
I mean, to that extent, when we look back at the X-Men movies, there's one thing we can acknowledge. I think it's especially starting out, their casting choices were phenomenal.
Oh yeah. Every time.
For the X-Men.
Impressive. Yeah.
Yeah. They knew how to do it. So, all right. Well, CP, that actually takes us to a segment that Ivor's been requesting for a while, which is we are returning to do a list.
Oh, okay. All right.
So we are actually going to do top 5 Fox X-Men and then sort of accompanying superhero movies within both the Fox and if anybody made an appearance in Deadpool and Wolverine, as well as a bottom 5 Fox X-Men and accompanying superhero movies. So we'll go ahead and start off. I'm going to just read off my top 5, and then I want you to sort of tell me what your thoughts are on that and what you would place there. So top 5 for the X-Men and accompanying superhero movies is, I'm going to do an honorable mention for Blade because he made an appearance and we did get a trilogy out of that character, which was quite impressive. But number 5, I'm actually going to put Deadpool and Wolverine. Number 4, I'm going to put X-Men First Class. Number 3, X2, X-Men United. I had a real chance to put that at 2, but whatever.
Yeah, you should have missed that one.
2 is Logan, and 1 is X-Men Days of Future Past. So what are your thoughts?
Very good list. Very good list. I think I mean, as I said, I'm a big fan of the Tom Jane Punisher movie, so I probably would have considered in my list, I probably would have worked that in maybe around 5 honorable mention spot.
Can we
And
acknowledge how brutal that movie is? Like, I don't know if we get a Tom Jane Punisher movie in like a Disney.
oh, no way.
I don't think so. I don't think Disney's going to greenlight a movie like that. It's
Too violent.
incredibly brutal. Yeah, violent. No, like there's a violence to Deadpool and Wolverine, but it's sort of a stylized
Comedic
comic book
violence.
violence.
Not
Yeah.
like this guy issuing retribution on this family and,
Yeah, because like his family got murdered.
yeah, yeah,
You're like, whoa.
yeah, it's a kind of a different style. The other one that I would have put in, and that's just because I know a lot of people had fans of the movies, but again, I thought the casting was actually incredible. Is the original Fantastic Four series. So I would put that first one down. I thought the casting was great. I actually love the way that they brought these characters to life in a cinematic way that
Yeah.
didn't seem. I mean, because the Fantastic Four runs the risk of being incredibly cheesy, and they
It
made it work.
it does get a little close, I guess I would say, but they sort of are able to pull it off.
Yeah, yeah. So for my thought, but I mean, those X-Men movies that you mentioned at the top are incredible X-Men movies.
Well, my favorite X-Men movie overall is Days of Future Past, and I think it's an incredible film. They do a lot of things right in this movie. I actually like how they handle time travel. I think they explain it very well in the sort of the opening scene, and I enjoyed that very much. I really love the casting across the board. I thought
Oh,
everybody
so good.
was incredible. I liked the idea of removing Wolverine's adamantium. It just sort of gave us a slightly different take on a character that otherwise is always sort of the same.
Yeah.
So he's not quite as powerful as he typically would be. I
Yeah.
really love, I think one of my favorite scenes is when they go to capture Raven or save her rather. And they get there and Charles is like, hey, Mystique, Raven, like, we're here to help you. And then boom, you just see Magneto lift the gun up and he's like, yeah, it's way easier if we just kill you. And like, to me, that is a villain.
Yeah.
That is like, no, and you literally hear Charles. He's like, no, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, hey, we can figure this out. He's like, I did figure it out. She dies.
This is
and
the solution.
It's done. And he actually does fire the gun off at her, So I love that. I like the idea of Charles sort of having to regain his confidence.
Yeah.
Both in himself and in mankind a little bit. There's just so much there to love, and I think they execute it really well. And then, of course, one of my favorite action sequences that Marvel's done is the Quicksilver scene in when they're breaking Magneto out of his jail cell.
Yeah.
And my reasoning for this is like every time we've ever seen a fast person, whether it's sort of the Flash or other versions of Quicksilver, they always show them as fast or almost like a whiz across the screen, and in this case, they were like, what if everything was slowed down and we totally experienced what it would be like to be him if he was moving that fast?
Yeah.
And it really works. I thought it was amazing. The audience responded incredibly well to it. I don't know if we needed another one in X-Men Apocalypse. It still works great, but just the surprise of like doing something new and innovative with a comic book character was awesome. I love that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I do think you're right. The Charles Xavier thing is really, taking this character who's a pillar of strength and faith and optimism and challenging him at his core. And then we are able to see how he becomes this character of stability later in the X-Men because he went through those trials earlier. I think it's great.
Yeah, I thought overall the movie works. I think it's a perfect blending of the two timelines that we've had of the X-Men. And then they also give the original sort of X-Men their proper send-off that they never really got.
Yeah, I would agree.
And that scene where Wolverine goes back to the mansion, the X mansion, and he's, everybody's there, and you're like, oh my God, like we can let it go.
The world has been, everything is right. The world again. Thank you.
And then obviously Logan, which here we have a movie with excellent character arcs. Obviously they're closing Wolverine's character arc. and introducing this sort of adult child relationship with him and his daughter and that dichotomy. But overall, I mean, this is a movie that I thought was incredibly well acted and sort of gives a proper ending to that X-Men series. So if Deadpool and Wolverine is the salute and the farewell, that's like that's the end.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree.
So, and I loved Logan. I actually just rewatched it not too long ago, and I think it works on almost every level too. There's something, it's brutal, it's sad, it's also funny, and they do a lot of really great things. Again, the villains here, not necessarily the strongest, but overall, yeah, I thought it was awesome. And then CP, I was looking at X2, X-Men United, which is also of the original X-Men movies, my favorite one.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree.
There's a scene where Wolverine turns on the radio in a car, and I think NSYNC is playing.
Yep.
So
I remember it. I don't know if it's Bye 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 though.
I don't know if it was either,
I would
but
be
it was
curious.
NSYNC.
Yeah.
But I mean, how incredible, because that song became a viral sensation again after Deadpool and Wolverine. You're literally seeing people do the dance on TikTok, Reels,
Yep.
YouTube. I even saw one the other day. It was two old guys. I mean, I don't even know if they've ever heard the song before, but they learned the dance.
That's hilarious.
You get a little bit of a resurgence here, which was pretty exciting. And then I think it was Madonna's "Is Like a Prayer."
Yeah.
Yeah, those both probably shot up the charts, just like Running Up That Hill did with Stranger Things a few years back. So, I'm sure those songs are enjoying a resurgence, but that dance in particular, which he does in the opening credits, and just incredible.
So fun. Yeah.
So, but X2, I mean, to me, that's like a definitive X-Men movie. I really love the mystery surrounding Wolverine's origins here. I thought the nod at the end to the Dark Phoenix storyline, which had been, a slow burn building, really paid out. I loved the sacrifice by Jean Grey. It was awesome. The X-Men, it was a full continuation of the first X-Men movie, but it felt like a natural progression.
Yeah, I would agree.
So I loved that. And then, of course, Stryker and Magneto as the villains are just incredible. Yeah, again, right. And here you have Magneto in that dual role where he's with them, not with them. Then he's like, hey, instead of us trying to sneak around, I'm just going to kill everybody.
Yep.
Villain. I mean, he's fantastic.
Yep.
So anyway, CP, I don't know. Is there any other movie that you think is missing from this top 5?
No, I think I listed the ones that I thought were good there. Not really. I mean, the Daredevil movie is always an interesting one because I know there was a lot of people who loved it and a lot of people who hated it. But it was also interesting in the sense that it brought such a what I would consider kind of secondary comic book character to mainstream culture.
Yeah, agreed. Especially back then, because we're talking about, it's X-Men, Spider-Man, Superman, Batman.
Yeah, it's the big pillar superheroes, and then all of a sudden we're getting a Daredevil movie.
Because it's even, you think a little bit like Daredevil, but even in 2007, 2008, when they're launching the MCU with Iron Man, at that time, I mean, Iron Man was sort of considered a second-tier Marvel character.
Yeah.
Not somebody that you would build the entire MCU on, right? You'd think it'd be Spider-Man, but instead they went with Iron Man and it worked. So it's kind of cool when those movies do show up and you're like, that was an interesting take.
Yeah.
So, and I do love, like, most of these movies that we're talking about are also part of that first wave of comic book movies. X-Men, the Raimi Spider-Man franchise, the Nolan Batman trilogy, this sort of before pre-MCU. Yeah. I know the Nolan trilogy definitely went into the MCU, I think, with Rises, but generally you're looking at comic book movies before they established the shared shared world and crossovers and all that. So it's quite fun. But okay, now let's take a look at the bottom 5. And for this, it's not the best, but okay, so my bottom 5 is X-Men Apocalypse, 4 is X-Men Dark Phoenix, 3 is Elektra, 2 is Fantastic Four the reboot, and number 1 is number 1 is New Mutants. So
Okay.
what are your thoughts on that list? Am I missing anything?
Yeah, I think you're wrong about a couple things.
Okay.
One, you should put Punisher Warzone on there because that is an awful movie.
Okay.
As I said, so bad that Tom Jane didn't even come back to be the Punisher.
Yeah, that's pretty
That
bad.
that's pretty bad. I personally, I mean, we had this debate on the podcast once. You know, I love X-Men Dark Phoenix. I think it's better
Hmm.
than X-Men The Last Stand. So I would drop Last Stand down to the bottom.
Okay. I didn't mind The Last Stand as much as the hate that it gets from fans. I mean, I think it's wholly regarded as the weakest of the original three, but I didn't think it was horrible. I still enjoy that movie. It's kind of like Rises to me. Like it's the worst of the three, but I still like it.
Now, the other major movie that you forgot on that list,
Ooh, okay.
Wolverine Origins.
Oh yeah. That's true.
That is so bad. I mean, it's so bad that Ryan Reynolds in Deadpool 2 had to go, you know,
Retcon it.
yeah, retcon it because it was awful. And we were so excited to finally get the Wolverine Sabretooth Striker kind of storyline that had been hinted at through the X-Men movies. And it was just done wrong. And the crazy thing about it is, I mean, when you look at the rest of that series, right?
Yeah.
The other two movies are great. It goes from the sequel is good, and then the third one is one of the best comic book movies ever made. But that first one is so bad.
Yeah, I would say I would disagree. I think the second one is I would call it good but forgettable.
Yeah,
It wasn't anything that is required viewing. It doesn't really feel like anything from it is like super memorable. I remember he fights on top of a train, but I mean,
yeah,
as far as comic book movies go, Age of Ultron, Spider-Man
yeah,
2,
yeah.
Incredibles, like
Dark
there's a
Phoenix.
lot of scenes on there's a lot of scenes on trains. Yeah, Dark Phoenix. So, I mean, it's not unique enough to me to be better than say like the Spider-Man Doc Ock fight on a train or even the Incredibles one, at the beginning of the first movie. So, I don't know, like there wasn't a whole lot. So I'd probably say that one is forgettable, but
When I
also
say it's good, I
watchable.
mean the levels of dreck that the first one is, and then they come back and show us like a decent Wolverine movie. I'm like, it seems like the leaps and bounds of an improvement that it is just immeasurable.
Yeah, I know. I think like for fans, like the thing they most remember is at the end or the post-credit scene when he like opens the case and it has the suit, but he never puts it on.
Yeah,
Like that's probably what people remember
yeah,
most from that
yeah,
movie.
yeah.
And then of course Logan's incredible. It made the top five. Uh the other two though, so Elektra. I know you didn't hate Elektra as much as I did.
I did not hate Elektra, but I like the character of Elektra, so I don't know that it's such a great movie. It's just more of like a movie that I like. That makes sense.
Elektra totally seemed like a character that like if I would love to see pop up in other movies, just did not need her own movie to me. Just
Fair
didn't
enough.
need it.
Fair enough.
Like if you have this shared universe, like if she popped up in an X-Men movie, I'm here for it. If there's a Daredevil 2, bam, she's back.
Mhm.
But her own movie, I couldn't get on board. I just didn't see the point of it at all. The Fantastic Four reboot, to me, talk about something that nobody was asking for.
That
Like
was
the movie's not good, and I understand that the movie went through incredibly dramatic production changes. So I think they changed directors, they changed writers, they came back for reshoots. Overall, it was a mess. So, the movie itself had a really, really rough production. Now, that's not to say that it couldn't have been great and stood alone and sort of been this like great thing because the Fantastic Four are awesome, but it didn't. It didn't work at all to me. And it just, to me, I ask myself, why was this even made?
well, and I think the biggest failure is actually the portrayal of Doctor Doom.
Oh, yeah.
Reworking his origin story, he just was a lousy villain, and I mean, this is one of the greatest villains in comic books, and way to just botch that completely from the start.
And that's a big deal, I think, when you're looking at these franchises. For instance, we talked earlier about Kang in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. You know, really, that is an instance where Ant-Man should probably be dying to put over Kang and make him seem like this incredibly powerful person that not one individual Avenger can take on. And instead, they nerf him, right?
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
have him get beat by Ant-Man. Sure, it's just a variant, but at the same time, you're like, I mean, that really makes me think that, like, do we need the Avengers? Could the
Yeah.
Hulk just handle this?
Yeah, right.
Like, maybe even She-Hulk. So I don't know. I'm just saying, like, when you want your villains to feel so big and overwhelming that you need a team up movie.
Yeah.
And obviously Marvel nails this with Thanos specifically. I think Loki works because he has his army, but as an individual, you don't need to team up against him,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's the
Yeah.
Chitauri.
Yeah.
But when it comes to Doctor Doom, like you said, we're talking about, in Marvel Comics, one of their best villains ever. And he should feel that way when he's on
Yeah.
screen.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't come across that way. I mean, it should almost feel like if he's that big and bad, like in the Fantastic Four, that it's almost like, hey, send in these guys from the MCU to come help him out over here. Like,
Yeah.
you should be that big and bad that you're like, listen, you guys need to, Fox, Disney, you guys got to work out a deal, kind of like Sony and Marvel or Sony and Disney,
Yeah.
because the Fantastic Four needs some freaking help because Doctor
No.
Doom is insane.
Right. And just didn't get it.
So, and then the final one on my list, my number one was New Mutants. Again, just a movie that I don't think anybody was asking for.
Well, it came out at such a weird time, right? Because we'd already seen two distinct cinematic versions of the X-Men, and they were both done relatively well. Casting in both instances was on point. The stories, there were some movies that were better than others, but I think for the most part, fans were satisfied with it. And then all of a sudden, we get New Mutants, which seems like a very clear attempt at rebooting X-Men. It never went anywhere. And it just, again, as I think you summed it up best, it was the X-Men movie no one was asking for.
Well, and then it's off genre. So they're toying around with, like, horror elements and some different things. And then not only that, but if I'm not mistaken, when New Mutants was actually released, it had already been decided that they're concluding the whole Fox X-Men thing. So like they released it when it was like, what? So the perfect example for this is The Flash, where it was like they released it, you're like, sure, we got it, but like it's over. We already know it's over.
Yeah.
This isn't going anywhere. And obviously it performed dismally. Well, New Mutants had that same sort of issue where the fans, it's like, why would I even watch this? Because we already know it's not
going anywhere. Yeah.
So, and then kind of like a Fantastic Four, which is number 2 on my list. I just didn't think it worked. Like,
yeah,
I don't think the characters were memorable. I can't even now thinking about it. I'm like, was there any memorable action sequence? I'm like, I just don't think it worked. It didn't give anything to the genre that we're like, hey, I mean, at least we got this, right?
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
So, well, all right. CP, unless you have any other thoughts on that bottom 5 list, that actually does it for our episode this week.
That's it. I mean, is Blade Trinity in the running for bottom 5? Is it that bad?
I don't think so. I mean, again, you're looking at sort of a diminishing quality from the Blade trilogy, but at the same time, like, I still enjoyed that movie.
Okay.
Fair enough. Like Blade in general. Blade to me was a character that I'm like, hey, dude, I want to hang out with this guy and watch him kick vampire ass.
That's what you got in 3 movies.
Right? Blade techno opener, just amazing sequence. Like, there's a lot in Blade that I'm like, this is dope. Even some of the side characters, like, I don't know. I enjoy that trilogy. I'd watch it.
All right. Cool.
So, all right. Well, to our listeners, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the show. Hope you get to go see Deadpool and Wolverine if you haven't already. But
or go see it again.
Yeah. More importantly, let us know your thoughts. We had quite a few different questions on this movie, and we would love to get your comments and thoughts on some of those specific things. Is this the best live action version of Wolverine we've ever gotten? How do you think Deadpool and Wolverine will fit into the MCU? Was there anyone you wanted to see in Deadpool and Wolverine that didn't make an appearance? Would love to hear that and any other comments you guys have. So thank you so much for always just sending your opinions and well, sometimes criticisms. So But be sure to continue the conversation on social media and our website, filmmakerscompass.com, where we have a feed of all previous episodes, as well as links to all of our social media, which is at FilmComp Podcast or at FilmComp Pod. And you can follow me personally at Big Kid Dman and CP.
You can follow me at NDCal5. Thank you for hanging out and talking comic book movies with us this week. We expect to see you back here next week. Until then, keep watching movies.